What makes Disney Disney? What does it mean to Disneyfy something? How can we tell that something is Disney? What makes Disney so unique and so valuable? How have we arrived in these weird fandom predicaments where we can tell that Disney has done something that is not Disney? How do we know that something is not Disney? And why does it concern us? On February 22nd, 2003, Disney Parks published a blog post revealing a first look of a new section of the Disneyland Hotel called The Villas as part of their Disney Vacation Club offerings. The artistic renderings presented a seemingly generic but fresh modern hotel design and a description that read, "The villas at Disneyland Hotel will blend timeless Walt Disney Animation Studios classics with contemporary designs, delicately curating a celebration of Disney history in the place where it all started, the Disneyland Resort." This will be the fourth tower at the Disneyland Hotel, located just steps away from the downtown Disney district. Well, the Disney social media fandom critiqued this design with seemingly deep fervor, calling the design bland, too ordinary, plain. It's just another Marriott. Unacceptable lack of theming. What happened to Imagineering? And it's not Disney. Similar reactions were made before when Disney Parks revealed concept art for the new DVC Tower next to the Polynesian Village Resort and the proposed Reflections Resort next to Bay Lake, claiming that they were both bland and not Disney. Twitter's social media personality @GoAwayGreen tweeted this challenge. "How much Disney theming do you want in your hotel room? What will make y'all satisfied?" Great question. Well, that drew some responses. One response was made by @FuturePort82 tweeting, "Guess it depends on what Disney theming means. If it's movie characters, absolutely zero. If it's high quality, well-considered placemaking that makes me believe I'm somewhere else, then tons." I don't disagree with this response. As a matter of fact, I partly agree with it. But the idea does raise questions. So let's examine this Disney theming. What is it? Well, we know it exists because apparently we can see it, and we can see its absence. But what is it really? Is it placemaking? If so, isn't a toned-down name-brand hotel chain a place? The best themed lands of Disney parks do indeed have things like utilitarian-style restrooms and such that blend into the experience. Are those elements not Disney? Well, of course they are. They're elements of placemaking integrated into the lands, bland elements and necessary elements, but it works. So where's this line? How can we evaluate what is Disney? I would like to present a lens by which we can see Disney and know that something Disney is indeed Disney, especially if it's at a Disney resort. And I'll start with this claim, that this presented extension of the Disneyland Hotel may well be one of the greatest achievements of design Disney has ever made. Let me explain. To unlock Disney, we have to go to the core, the absolute basic core of humanity. Get ready and put on your mouse ear thinking caps. We're going to dive into some neuroscience here. The next time you go to a Disney park, walk into the park and walk toward the presence of people. Now don't look at the things and features of the park near you or the people. Just look at the people. Now, as you're looking, turn the dial of your vision to imagine that you're seeing their bodies as transparent. No, not their clothes, their entire selves partially invisible. You can see them, but imagine that they look like half-transparent ghosts, like they're made of glass. You can see them, but you can also see through them. Can you see that? Now, imagine that their brains are not transparent. Their brains are completely opaque, and you can see them fully. They're inside the transparent skulls of their transparent bodies, floating up above the pavement. This theme park is full of dynamic brains all moving around to and fro. Now imagine how weird that is. It's weird, isn't it? Why are there a bunch of floating brains everywhere? What's going on? I pose this image because it's key to visualize a certain reality. This is what we actually are. This is what I am. This is what you are. Our bodies are mere mobile devices surrounding, containing, propping up, supporting, and protecting our brains, carrying them around this strange and assorted dimension we know is the reachable universe. Brains and theme parks. So what are brains? Well, essentially, brains are just clumps of trillions of teeny tiny little protein and lipid bags full of seawater and other stuff, snugly packed into our hard skulls. Some of those protein lipid bags are long, branched out and conductive, and others are just packing material between the conductive ones, and others are delivery bags and custodial bags. The long branched out bags of seawater intertwine around each other, and each branch coming in close contact with many other branches of many other bags in many areas. The charge bags are called neurons. The packing bags are called glia, types of cells called astrocytes. And the delivery and custodial bags are smaller astrocytes. This material is our media. Once these long neuron bags of seawater are provided energy and nutrients, their conductive capabilities activate, and many points of close contact between interconnected neurons begin to pass charged materials from one to the next, and the next, and the next, and the next. And with this happening amongst a large number of connection points, a certain logic forms. This constant occurrence of logic propagating across these enormous neural networks is what we call thought. It's what we're doing right now. Thought is the dynamic activities among networks of connections across the brain's nerves. When networks of connections activate, a new presence comes into existence. That presence we know as the mind. The mind is the brain turned on. The mind is the code, utilities, and applications operating upon our brain, our media. Yep, our cells are just vast networks of connected, fatty, conductive bags of seawater, connected, energized, and active. Hi. Now I know I'm talking in simple fashion here, and there's much more involved, but in general, that's what you see walking the paths of Disneyland or any Disney park. Minds traveling all around the place. That's what we are. That is what we see. The brain can exist without the mind, but the mind cannot exist without the brain. The media of the mind is more than just the brain. The mind is also built upon all the connections of nerves all across the body. If the pinky toe is injured, the entire mind reacts. Reaction could occur instantaneously. Some reactions take place over time. The mind is the beauty that rides upon the brain. So with brains and minds, we're partly beast machines and partly magical. Perfect for a Disney park, huh? There is one strange thing about our minds. None of our minds have ever seen the odd and assorted universe outside of our bodies. Our actual minds are trapped within the dark spaces inside our bodies forever. If our actual minds ever do see the strange outer dimension beyond our skin, that means we're either in surgery or we've been severely injured, and we're probably in a very dire situation. So our minds don't really know what's out there. We don't really know that the castle at the end of Main Street truly exists. There's no possibility of pure certainty. And we also know that there is indeed plenty of danger out there in the wild universe. There are microbes and floods and fire and gravity and flying projectiles and predators and other bodies and all kinds of concerns. So, this raises questions. Can a mind trust the unknown universe that it cannot see? Can a mind trust its body to carry the mind throughout the unknown universe over a lifetime? Can a mind trust itself to trust and survive this universe? And because of these concerns, the depths of our minds are always asking, can I trust the universe right now? Our mind presumes no to those questions, and then it tests. From any moment to the next, our minds are constantly aware that our brains are physically vulnerable, and so our brain minds are naturally equipped to handle some of this potential for danger. The mind constantly strives to survive whether we are consciously aware of it or not. And our mind must have its supporting body survive with it and for it, whether we're conscious of that or not. And the mind will always do what it can to survive. Our minds do this all the time, constantly. It wills itself into the next second, every second, always expecting doom for each following second. Even in the middle of pleasant moments, it's constantly reducing uncertainty, and there's nothing we can ever do to stop it. So how are our encapsulated minds equipped to address this mysterious and potentially dangerous dimension outside of our skins? First, the brain is an energy hog. It gets first dibs on blood, nutrients, and oxygen. Remember, the body exists for the benefit of the brain. Because the brain's construct involves charged materials, the brain expends a lot of energy. Along with basic cognitive thought and normal bodily control and management, the brain consumes over 20% of bodily energy. Just existing. It can consume a higher percent of bodily energy during strenuous cognitive activity. Second, the brain is directly integrated with an amazing physical sensory system. We feel the senses of solid surface pressure, sense of liquid pressure, sense of gas pressure, sense of fluid flow, sense of limb reach, sense of touch location, sense of head and body orientations, sense of balance, sense of solid and liquid vibrations, sense of gas vibrations as sound, sense of temperature, sense of light, sense of color, sense of light images, sense of light motion, sense of depth, sense of chemistry in the air, sense of chemistry in solids and liquids, sense of pain, sense of aches, sense of hunger, and all internal physical senses. All of these directly connected to the brain via long neuron networks. Now, our mind with its connected sensors encounters features existing in that strange world out there. It receives signals, runs multitudes of cognitive processes upon those signals, and produces a best guess construct to infer what this thing we call the world might be. And I just want to note right here, since our minds are forming mental constructs of what we sense, the perceptions we create may not fully, completely match what is actually outside of our skulls. We are wholly dependent on the efficacy of our senses and skills of our minds to perform the best possible processing to form what we believe to be accurate interpretation of what is truly outside of our skulls. But it is impossible to absolutely know with pure certainty that our perception fully equals actuality. It is impossible. Our perceived consciousness every day is in fact mostly fantasy. The best fantasy the mind can create to best match the likely reality that is outside of us. We never truly see what's out there. We never have. Everything that we experience is cognitively constructed. There is nothing that we experience that isn't cognitively constructed. It's all one big controlled hallucination all the time, since your birth to this very moment. So what does all this fantasy have to do with Disney? Hold on, we're getting there. Your mind knows things. It knows things you don't know. Let me say that again. Your mind knows things that you don't know. It's a risk-assessing machine. When our minds are present in physical environments, our senses draw everything in. And I do mean everything. All light, all sound, all touch, all smell, all taste, all the feels flood heavily into the subconscious. And here's a key point. Our mind is always evaluating its fitness for survival. When we encounter a scene, our mind pre-processes all of the sensory information. It kicks in this deep primal sense of likelihoods and triages our pre-processed physical experiences into categories. One category is, I'm familiar with that, which means that a sense has already been associated with an existing memory that has already been evaluated for safety. If that's the case, the mind will pay brief recognition and dismiss the sense, relying upon the comfortable familiarity of the memory. Its fitness is assured. The mind will mostly use this dismissed scenery for wayfinding and for recollecting familiar sensations. Repeated experiences with familiar scenes reinforce the mind's assurance of fitness. The other category of triage is, I'm unfamiliar with that. We see something new, something difficult to associate, something difficult to comprehend. The scene may be a familiar room, but now there's a new red dot over there. And so our minds must test it, and that something new sticks in our recognition. We must evaluate this red dot. For this category, internal processes activate in our mind and determine if this unfamiliar physical sense is potentially concerning or threatening. If our sensory scan results in a high certainty of danger, the body can react immediately with reflexive quickness. This comes from the deepest core of our brain closest to our spinal cord, within closest reach of our muscles. And you have very little cognitive control of this reaction as it's ingrained into the nerves themselves. But if there's a reasonable assurance that something is concerning, yet not threatening, then a low-level cognitive process activates. And here, in our cognitive processes, our mind can work, not so quickly as needed in reflex. And there's a lot of cognitive processing that takes place here. All of this happens within a low level of consciousness we call the subconscious. And having this subconscious as a safety net allows us to have a higher abstraction of consciousness that rides on top. And this higher level of consciousness, mostly oblivious to the heavy processing that is going on in the subconscious, is where we can experience self, where we can experience life, where our perceived continuity of experience from moment to moment, day to day, year to year, and live our lives as life experience beings. This higher level of consciousness is where we have our mental cursor directing our attention to this or that, whether that attention be outside of our mind or within our minds. All the while, our subconscious layer living below is constantly scanning the world for our assurance. Our subconscious performs such a high-resolution scan of the world using our senses that our higher conscious is left so convinced that we have a perfect capture of our world. Our higher conscious, living under this illusion, is convinced that our senses sense actual reality. Our minds actually believe they could live outside of our head and see the world as it senses from inside. And while this is not true, it does allow us to live comfortably. But the subconscious is constantly uncertain and constantly scans. And the more our subconscious works, the more variety it encounters, and the more it can test those assorted scenes and environment variations and build more and more and more assurance of the mind's fitness for existence. The mind becomes this pattern recognizing and prediction machine. We encounter a familiar thing and our mind confirms its safety from memories of satisfaction from previous encounters. We encounter a new thing and our mind attempts to associate it with a similar satisfactory thing, ensuring safety. We encounter something really strange, really unfamiliar, and our minds pay strict attention and works hard to evaluate. And once the mind confirms safe satisfaction with that very unusual thing, it produces this prime deep sense of pride of its hard work to assure survivability, and thereby produces a meaningful, deep, and lasting memory. After experiencing so many new things and verifying lots of circumstances where the mind is certain of its fitness, the brain secretes these happy chemicals that reinforce the brain's success. These neurotransmitters help the brain grow in its good knowledge. With all of these varying experiences, the mind very quickly refines and improves its model's construct of the universe. It becomes smart. And with all these physical senses of the world, the mind begins to experience something called cognitive senses and sensations. These senses are not the same as physical senses that we receive. These are the senses that only the depths of our mind can comprehend. And they're generated from cognitive processes that are applied to the physical senses, or from internal calculation and pondering. Cognitive senses produce all kinds of cognitive impressions and emotions and moods, which in turn produce physical reactions. There are a few physical senses, but there are hundreds, perhaps thousands of cognitive senses. And these cognitive senses, and our reactions to them, produce a richness of life. And that is where Disney comes in. First, let me explain. When a mind encounters a creation, whether that creation is natural or man-made, the features of that creation, as the physical senses capture them, produce cognitive senses and sensations. For instance, when one encounters an entrance sign that reads Disneyland, one might experience the sensation of wonder, of fantasy, of whimsy, of delight, of amazement, of excitement, of adventure, of anticipation, of intrigue, of beauty, of celebration, of discovery, of escape, of family, of hospitality, dozens of sensations all at once. And that's just one object, and a sign at that. These cognitive sensations are not something you can put on a table and point to and say, here's fantasy. It's in your mind. When a person is at their home, on the other hand, their experiences are not very challenged. The mind has scanned the scenes, the objects, the circumstances, and all the small details many, many times. And at home, the mind experiences a stable mode of energy day in and day out. Even when a person goes to work or goes to the store or goes to familiar restaurants, everything is already understood, so the mind is certain of its fitness and conserves its energy. But turn our minds back to Disneyland. Here, everything is unusual. Everything. That Disneyland sign produced so many incredible sensations just by itself. Well, so does the train, so does Town Square, so does Main Street USA, so does Sleeping Beauty Castle. Everything, every detail in between. Here, the mind is challenged with every step, every head turn, every glance. Here, the mind is at full rev on power drive, lots of energy. Think of a person's first trip to Disneyland. Their mind will sense every second with intense scrutiny. Thank goodness some bits of Disneyland are familiar in structure and concept. It's not completely alien. For instance, the mind can handle familiar images of structure and associate to what it has previously learned, such as the shapes of buildings, of doors and chairs and trees and pathways. Once a mind sees an unusual-looking door, it associates it to other doors it has seen, doors the mind has already previously established as non-threatening, and keeps the higher conscious sane. But all in all, at Disneyland, everything is unusual. This high-frequency cognitive evaluation is going full speed with every unusual thing the mind encounters. This activity is significantly taxing on the subconscious, constantly evaluating its primal fitness for survival. These many first-time encounters with Disneyland are so incredibly memorable because the mind becomes proud of itself for surviving, and surviving more because neurotransmitters flood the tissues throughout the entire day. The next time a guest visits, those memories reassemble themselves, causing more floods of dopamine, and the mind is happy, nostalgic, amazed, thrilled, impressed, swimming in a state of fantasy for hours on end. So much brain energy is going on all throughout the day, all the time, and this doesn't even account for what the brain does just being around other people. So let's examine this process and let's go through this again. The mind encounters an unusual creation. Physical senses sense the features of the creation. Our subconscious performs cognitive processes upon those senses. We then experience a multitude of cognitive sensations all at once. Those sensations produce cognitive reactions and impressions in the forms of moods and emotions. We may then produce physical responses like increased heart rates or smiles or stomach butterflies or laughter. These noticeable reactions, be they cognitive or physical, store as memories. And finally, we can revisit and re-encounter creations to further test and confirm our mind's fitness for survival and to satisfy as tested success. This makes us happy. That is the basic human experiential process in a nutshell, and we all perform this constantly. But what if we flip the script? What if we're the designer of the encountered creation? What if we are the creation that some other mind is encountering? What if we're able to produce influence over what encountering minds experience? What if we are able to target which cognitive sensations that an observer ought to experience, and design features upon a creation to recruit and exploit and cause specific sensations? What if, after identifying target sensations, we skillfully apply specific, well-considered features to the creation that indeed successfully pull those exact sensations from the observer's minds? What if we become really good at that, targeting select and appropriate sensations, then designing and building creations that successfully draw them out? Any observer who encounters a creation does so using their mind, and nothing but their mind. Therefore, the designer must prepare the creation for the observer's mind. Some designers are good at this. Many designers are unaware of this. And the great designers are keenly aware of this and specially skilled for this. That, my friends, is Disney. Disney strategically influences the mind and does so with very specific and focused design and with very controlled and controllable creations. That is what Disney does. That is what Disney is. That is what Disney designers and makers are very good at and well experienced with. Many gather that Disney's core competency is about story. Story is only part of it. It's a big part of it, but story is one creation among many creations. The creations are what Disney makes compelling. Even if Disney Imagineers and producers don't know that this is what they're doing, this is in effect what they do. They're targeting mixes of cognitive sensations, strategically creating palettes of sensations, and then designing creations where all features carry the spirits of those sensations, spiritual assets, and then build creations and place observers in range to encounter them. And Disney evaluates if these creations do indeed pull these sensations. That is what it means to be Disney. That's what it means to Disneyfy something. These creations are in the form of buildings, of features, of landscaping, of themes, of characters, of story arcs, of story plots, of attractions, of area music, of lighting, of cast members, and of so many things. Our minds are inundated. And with all that, Disney adds on to this. Yes, one section of a park can carry a cohesive set of palettes carrying loads of specifically selected senses applied to everything, but as soon as one turns a corner, they walk into a wholly different section, a section that carries its own set of palettes, its own set of assorted creations, challenging the mind even more. Even though these new loads challenge the mind actually loves it. It thrives on assortment. It seeks as much assortment as it can get so it can build its mental library of things that it can confirm survival. The mind loves an ever-growing catalog of things that will not kill it. So Disney is also this assortment, this lake of surprises that challenge the mind at each glance. Just think of how much Disney invests to build magnificent creations that often take years to design, years to build, built by highly skilled specialists, just so in the end, our minds can encounter them in designed ways. Entire berms of heavy soil have been bulldozed and arranged with hundreds of trees planted just for the benefit of our minds. just to capture our mind's attentions. Think about that. And here's the business model. Since Disney parks, and everything else they do, provide such lovely assortment of creations that lend to compelling and fascinating sensations, sensations that minds want to encounter deeply and repeatedly, to test and confirm brain fitness across this strange universe, the mind will sacrifice things that it treasures in order to encounter these odd creations. The guest will exchange cash for passes into parks. The guest will exchange credit for delights on the menus. The guest will sacrifice future assurance of security for soft plushies and colorful mementos. That is Disney. And think about this inundation and demanding energy that goes on all day long, from morning rope drops to nighttime fireworks and parade shows. Disneyland Resort has 2 parks, Disneyland Park and California Adventure. Both parks are intricately designed with this extremely high demand for the mind's attention. So, Disney obviously wants the minds to be in excellent condition for all that attention and energy the parks demand. Not just on day 1, but also on day 2 at that other park. So, now let's turn our attention back to the hotels. To best prepare the mind for a strong level of attention and activity that next day, because Disney's Disney and Disney's going to challenge the mind and the brain, we must encounter the best conditions for that next day. And those best conditions are hours of rest and relaxation. So when we observe that a hotel design is plain, is bland, is minimally themed, is Marriott, isn't that the point? The hotel is a creation carrying cognitive spiritual assets just like any other creation. Those aspects that Twitter snipers observed are themselves cognitive sensations. The sense of bland, the sense of plain, the sense of ease, the sense of serenity, the sense of low energy, the sense of... You see where this is going? With this perspective, the design of this hotel could be near perfect. Its selected spiritual assets are exactly what the mind needs. Imagine if this hotel design were more themed. Imagine if it took you to the jungle or to the seaside or the desert or space. Wouldn't the mind become busy, sensing and perceiving all this unusualness, causing the mind to stay awake and burn more energy without fuel? What would the next day feel like? Now, of course, themed Disney resorts are in some cases themed with enough subtlety that the theme features don't really overburden the mind's attention, and many guests can endure it. But not completely. Not ideally. Remember, guests going to sleep in the hotels just endured a day at the theme parks, or they just arrived from lengthy travel. Their minds are going to be pretty busy enough dwelling on recalled memories from those recent experiences. Overly themed resort settings could compete with that brain energy, cause guests to not receive adequate rest. A more subtle setting around them provides relief in this regard. Now, I do personally think that heavy theming in the exterior elements and lobby and welcoming areas and shops and restaurants, and to some degree recreation areas such as the pools, is appropriate. But once you get into your rooms, subtlety is kind of the key. And for this reason, this bland DVC resort design may well be one of Disney's greatest designs of all time. Now, to me, maybe the ideal design would be for Disney to provide a perfect simulation of your existing home bedroom. A bedroom organized in its most comfortable configuration. If you like it clean, Disney would simulate that cleanliness. If you like it messy, Disney would simulate that messiness. Whatever it takes to best calm your mind. So, recognizing that the mind is the active ingredient of a Disney experience, what are some good ways to enjoy Disney resorts knowing this impact on our brains and minds? Here's some of my advice. First, feed the brain well. Understand what the brain needs as physical fuel to operate efficiently, and seek foods that are great brain food. And do this well ahead of vacation. Avoid things that compromise a healthy brain. And second, don't worry about this universe trying to kill you. Don't worry about any of this things that your subconscious takes care of. Let your lower subconscious do its work on its own. That's its job, and it's great at that. It's worrying for you so that you don't have to worry. And third, prepare for the sensations and enjoy them. That's what you're buying. If you've experienced park sensations before, seek new ones. Reinforce your mind to play out with these sensations. When you're in the Haunted Mansion, recognize that you're in a real mansion that's actually haunted. When you're in Space Mountain, play like you're actually in real space, flying real rocket ships. And when you walk into Galaxy's Edge, you're on Batuu. Pretend you're on Batuu. And when you come back to Main Street, you're at the turn of the century. Just go ahead and own it. Feel those thousands of sensations and recognize them and challenge your mind. Save the how it works for another day. But when you do learn how stuff works, be excited about that. And when the day is done, rest. And as we discuss the mind, here's another amazing thing. Not only is the mind responsive to creations and able to produce senses based on those creations, the mind is also able to visually construct and assemble concepts before they're ever drawn or built into creation. How does that work? Well, find out soon on my new YouTube series called Innovate with Ease. Thank you for listening.